I have a question about Kvatch in Oblivion. Okay, so the Mythic Dawn has infiltrated basically every city in Cyrodiil. They are everywhere. And despite Kvatch being attacked from the inside, very few places seem to be going full paranoid military state. Meaning, in theory, they should be able to open Oblivion gates inside other cities with at most modest effort, especially considering how many empty or untrafficked areas are in some cities. But they don't. They mostly open them right outside city gates or in the middle of nowhere. So why was the first gate they opened literally inside the Kvatch Mages Guild? You could believe it was to turn public sentiment against mages, but that doesn't really make sense to me, and here's why. The Mythic Dawn at least seems to be composed mostly of mages, or at the very least those who are willing to utilize magic, as there is actually a difference in the Elder Scrolls between natural mages and those who use magical items, despite the obvious overlap at times. And they are trying to gain support for their cause. Turning the common people against magic users in general would fundamentally be at odds with their efforts. Not that the Dawn is made up of highly logical folk in the first place, but still. I do have a theory, but unfortunately there isn't much evidence for it, so it's more of a loose headcanon. I personally like to believe the Kvatch's Mages Guild was targeted because the Mythic Dawn were attempting to eliminate their greatest threat right off the bat. We all know the Mages Guild in Oblivion is a mess. The Archmage is at best incompetent, and at least half their numbers have been booted from the guild because they practice an art that is not even illegal in Cyrodiil. So why would the Mythic Dawn consider Kvatch's guild a threat in particular? Well, I don't think it's their specialty, because as far as I can tell, they specialize in conjuration, which I suppose in itself could be a threat to people using Daedra as allies. However, Coral's guild hall also specializes in conjuration, and nobody dropped the nigh literal gates of hell on them. This means there are a few possibilities. One, a member of Kvatch's guild was also a Dawn agent and willingly sacrificed themselves to open the gate in a place where they had some control, because few other mages were going to look at whatever ritual summons an Oblivion gate with much suspicion, considering they would have to know the exact ritual to realize it was a threat, and they were likely all practicing summoning rituals occasionally anyways. This is partially because Daedric magic is frowned upon and likely not studied by standard mages. Two, it may have been a matter of convenient timing and nothing else. And my favorite idea, 3. The Kvatch's Mages Guild was composed of mostly immensely powerful or hyper-competent mages who, if given any time to prepare, could have broken the siege on their own. Now, is there any evidence for any of this? No. None that I can find, at least. Probably because Kvatch is basically a smoking crater by the time the player arrives. And the only living member of the guild hall is both a near-emotional wreck and specializes in alchemy, so likely wouldn't have had a full grasp of her hallmate's full powers, even if we could ask her. It's also important to note mages in Elder Scrolls gameplay and in Elder Scrolls lore are two different beasts entirely, which I suppose is par for the course in fantasy games. Giving mages their lore-accurate power in games would likely break game balance in most franchises. Gameplay mages are kind of like this. While in most cases, lore mages are more like this. Even a fairly low-level competent mage in the lore would have little to fear from basic bandits or low-level Daedra, provided they aren't idiots, even though as the player, said bandits can kill you for gameplay reasons. And yeah, I know there are a handful of bandit mages, but those are obviously the dregs of mage society, especially when you consider joining the Mages Guild in Cyrodiil ensures you a bed and a roof over your head. So those mages either barely qualify as mages, or are idiots. After all, there was a surprisingly good reason some people in Winterhold fully believed the college was responsible for the Great Collapse, and yet do basically nothing about it. It would be near suicidal for even a decent group of non-magical warriors to attack a group of trained mages in Nirn. So given the mages' lore-accurate power, it kinda makes sense you wouldn't want them around if you were going to attack the city they live in. Although, that still doesn't explain them not doing it anywhere else. Unless the Dawn don't consider the rest of the guild halls real threats. This all does actually lead to a weird thought. The Oblivion Crisis probably did a lot less damage in Morrowind. If attacking a half-broken mages guild was their best first play in Cyrodiil, the Mythic Dawn would have been broken wholesale by the Telvanni Master Wizards. At least if they made the mistake of getting their attention. Not a very focused group, the Telvanni. They're almost as unfocused as my thoughts. I can actually picture Neloth waltzing into an open gate just to see what's in there, grabbing everything that looks reasonably useful for his research and then taking the sigil stone. Not in any actual attempt to close the gate, mind you, but just to study the damn thing. And he's not even the most powerful wizard in Morrowind, although he probably does come close to it at least. My mind goes to some strange places sometimes. Well, thanks again for listening to my deluded ramblings.